India should be Vishwa Guru, India should be teaching the world. Srila Prabhupada was Vishwa Guru before the Vishwa Guru slogan came.
Srila Prabhupada is the most important window into Bharat.
Until at a time when people retire, he finally took the plunge. He was unmatched in the kind of spread that he managed to have in every corner of the world, in every continent.
The idea was simple. The message of Krishna in the Gita, in the Bhagavatam, and in other Vedic literatures is very universal.
He able to convey that in a magnificent way, and a way which people understood. That is the only proof you need.
If you see in every facet of Indian culture, which was used for the glorification of God, Srila Prabhupada presented all of those things.
When you're ready for the message comes to you.
Again, I say this is the work of the divine. How else can you do it?
If you happen to read the book, I'm warning you, at the end of reading the book, you may also start chanting Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. A very good afternoon to everyone gathered here. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you will find that there's a lot of inspiration coming out of today's session for each and every one of you. I request the three dignitaries to kindly step forward. As they do so and settle down, allow me to please introduce each one of them to you. First, we have His Grace Shree Prajapati Das Ji, the Senior Vice President of ISKCON Bangalore and the Vice Chairman of the Akshaya Patra Foundation. Shree Prajapati Dasa in 1984 became a full-time missionary and dedicated member at the ISKCON temple. And before that, he came across Srila Prabhupada's teachings while he was studying at the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. We're happy to have him with us today. Next, we have Dr. Gautam Sen, taught international political economy at the London School of Economics and Political Science for over 2 decades. He's a member of the steering committee of the World Hindu Economic Forum, president of the World Association of Hindu Academicians, and co-director of the Dharmic Ideas and Policy Foundation. He is co-author of Analyzing the Global Political Economy, Princeton, 2009. We're delighted to have you here with us, sir. Thank you very much. And finally, we have Dr. Hindol Sen Gupta ji, a multiple award-winning author of 10 books. He has been a Chevening Scholar at Oxford, a Knight Baggot Fellow at Columbia University, and has a doctorate in international relations from the Geneva School of Diplomacy. He has been a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. He's Chief Economic Research Officer at Invest India, the National Investment Promotion Agency of the Government of India. Very happy to have you here with us. Hare Krishna. I now invite all three key speakers to kindly take over.
We are very happy to be here in Leicester midst all of you. And we also have a certain number of audience watching this event online. And Srila Prabhupada's life and his personal dedication and the sacrifices he made for spreading the message of Krishna all over the world is less known. ISKCON is known, Hare Krishna is well known. So Srila Prabhupada, as a very humble person, he always remained in the back. He wanted Krishna to be well known. In fact, in 1966, when he was establishing the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in New York, the attorney who was helping him to do the incorporation advised him that if you call your Society for Krishna Consciousness, no one in America will be able to appreciate this. Maybe you can call it Society for God Consciousness. Srila Prabhupada said, if the world does not know about Krishna, this institution of mine will make Krishna well known all over the world. And indeed, he was successful. In just a short life that he lived after that, in about a decade, Hare Krishna became a household word all over the world. And so while Srila Prabhupada did all of this, he remained as a humble saint behind and kept always Krishna in the forefront. So as his followers, we felt it is our duty that Prabhupada also should be known. And Srila Prabhupada started ISKCON when he was 70 years old. When he was a young man, soon after his graduation, he received an instruction from his guru, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura, that the message of Krishna should be spread all over the world. The idea was simple. The message of Krishna in the Gita, in the Bhagavatam, and in other Vedic literatures is very universal. It's not a message only for the Indians. It's not a message only for the Hindus. It's not a message only for the Brahmins and the priestly class. It's a message for everyone. And Krishna's message is simple. There is a mortal body, but this body is today animated because of the presence of the spirit soul. Krishna explains in the Gita, Bhumi rapo nalo vayuhu kam manu buddhirevacha ahankara mitiyam me bhinna prakrutirashtadha apare mitastva anyam prakrutim vidhi me param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Krishna is analyzing the anatomy of this body. He says this body is made of 8 elements. Panchabhuta, that we are all familiar as Indians. Bhumi, Apaha, Analaha, Vayuhu, Kam. And there is also 3 subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and ahankara. This is the mortal framework of this body. And then Krishna says, Aparehimitastva anyam, apart from these 8 elements, there is a 9th element in this body, which is the Jiva Bhuta. So 8 plus 1, 9 elements make this body. And then Krishna says, both the body, 8 elements, and the 9th element, the spirit, both of them are my prakriti, my energy. So, this is applicable not just for Hindus. This is applicable for everyone. Even a dog, a cat, a bird, a tiger also has these 8 plus 1 element. And all of this is an energy of the Lord. So, the message of Krishna is simple. We do not recognize we are spirit soul. We are identifying ourselves with the body, and the body has upadhi, or designations: male, female, young, old, human, animal. Now these designations actually separate us and divide us. The unity is possible if we forget all of these temporary designations of the body and identify the soul and the common origin of all souls, which is Krishna. And Bhagavatam and the Gita teaches that the inherent quality of the soul is to love God. And because just like children love their parents and parents love their children, it's natural, it's common. In the same way, our common father is Krishna. Krishna loves us, and we have an inherent love for Krishna, but right now that is forgotten and it is diffused in this material world, finding various objects for love, which finally is temporary and disappoints us. So Krishna wants us to develop love for Krishna, and when we love Krishna, we naturally love all of Krishna's creation. And the simple way to develop this love for Krishna is to chant the names of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Chanting the names of Krishna will revive our love for the Lord. This was the message, and that love of God will fill our hearts with joy and will enrich our lives. Srila Prabhupada wanted this message to be spread everywhere. So that was his mission. And although he received this order from his guru at a young age, he was about 24, 25. And he made many attempts all his life, but unfortunately, he was not successful. And finally, when he had turned 70, and he wanted to make one final attempt, and he came to America, and he was given I must share this important information. Prabhupada was running a pharmaceutical business, and so he had contacts in Bombay, in Calcutta, in Allahabad, and in different places in Delhi. And when he took sannyas and he wanted help, he remembered there was one businesswoman, Gujarati businesswoman in Bombay. She was running a shipping company, Scindia Shipping Company. Her name was Srimati Sumati Morarji. So Prabhupada goes to her and tells her, she's a very big woman, and Prabhupada was a simple sannyasi from Vrindavan, sadhu, not so easy to meet, rich, well-placed businesswoman in Bombay. And so he had to wait many days, many occasions outside her office. And finally, one day when she was coming out of the office, she asked her assistants, "Who is this sadhu who is sitting there?" And they informed her, "He has come from Vrindavan and he wants to meet you. And he has been coming again and again. And you have been busy, and so we never had an opportunity to let him meet you." So she said, no, send him in. And Sumati Morarji met Prabhupada as a sannyasi in saffron robes. And then Prabhupada explained to her that this is the mission my guru had given, and I have tried and I have failed, and now I want to make one last attempt. I have learned that you have many ships which are going all around the world. Can you please give me a ticket to go to America? And no, it's okay. If you can give me a ticket to go to America. It was a very unusual request for her. And she asked, Swamiji, you want to see America at this age? And so Prabhupada folded his hands and said, no, I don't have a desire to go do sightseeing in America. My Guru has ordered me, and so I want to make one last attempt before I die. And if you can send me in one of your ships to America. And she obliged. And Prabhupada always was very, very grateful to Mrs. Sumati Morarji. Later on, he met her many times. And she arranged a ticket for him to travel from Calcutta to New York. It was a 35-day journey in a cargo ship that Srila Prabhupada came. And that's how ISKCON was established. And Prabhupada spread this message of love of Krishna all over the world. And so I now request Gautam ji to say a few words.
Namaste. Let me be brief because you really want to hear the distinguished author and my friend Mr. Dr. Hindol Sengupta. I have known Hindol a bit longer than when he began writing this book, and I do believe that ISKCON Bangalore has chosen very wisely. And he really is the author to have written this wonderful book. It has a great many things, not just about the life of Srila Prabhupada, about which most people don't know. It also has a considerable amount of discussion about the profound philosophical and religious ideas which he articulated, and Hindol, being the scholar that he is, has been able to put them in context. My very positive feeling about the book is that it needed to be accessible, something people would like reading. And this is a book which virtually anybody with school-level English can make an attempt to read. I don't know if there are any plans to translate this book into other languages, but maybe that's a good idea. So I would really say, read it. It's extremely readable. Why is this book important? For another reason. We know a great deal about ISKCON. It's very difficult for anybody living in the modern world, virtually anywhere, even Ukraine, not to have heard and indeed have had direct experience of Ukraine, if only because they offer food to those who are hungry for free. But because it does two things, the book. One, which he emphatically demonstrates, which is that it is possible to achieve the impossible. For each one of us, we have many, many challenges in our lives, and very often, people, including myself, we get dispirited and we think it can't be done. When you read his life, you will think at least two things. It is possible humanly, at the age of 69, to embark on this incredible mission after 2 heart attacks, right? And secondly, I was not a deeply believing person, but this was a case of divine intervention. Lord Krishna made it possible. So it tells you that we all have it in ourselves to do extraordinary things, which is so reassuring to know, and also there is somebody up there who wills us along. And that's why I say you should read the book, because it is so easy to grasp the entire story, his ideas, his life. And life is mundane, and his was also mundane. He went to college, he did a degree. And then I believe he didn't want to take the certificate for nationalist reasons. He was hungry, he was unhappy. So he is like you and me, and yet he achieved something so extraordinary. And he did something else, which is what occurred to me as I was reading, and then I was reminded today as I was sitting in the car. I hope the analogy will not upset anybody. Muhammad used to claim that he is a summation of Jesus and Moses. And in a way, Srila Prabhupada integrated Mahaprabhu Chaitanya and Vivekananda in some way. Not just the ecstatic worship of Mahaprabhu Chaitanya that became so important in Bengal in the 15th century. And the, if you like, slightly dry philosophical understanding of Advaita Vedanta of Vivekananda. And he never integrated that, and he brought forward the whole notion of bhakti and chanting. And I have understood in my old age that chanting is not something which is just words uttered. It's a transformative experience. It changes you. It is a form of high form of yoga. And by changing you, it is not simply that you worship God. It tells you really, ultimately, which is the purpose. You worship all God's creatures because I am in every one of you. This is the great secret of Srila Prabhupada, that he made it possible for millions of people to get this message, you see. And he is therefore a remarkable phenomenon. In the 20th century, there's hardly anybody. There's only one other comparable example, is the Swaminarayan movement that has. But ISKCON has transcended the barriers of nation and religion. The other question which I pondered as I read this, because these are things you forget as you get old, that what were the 60s like? And why did Americans particularly find him so profound? They were coming out of a very conservative traditional era, which had McCarthy, anti-communism. It was a very tense period, and then there was this sudden surge of freedom, catalyzed somewhat by the Vietnam War and the student rebellions. And really, people were taking drugs and they were lost. They didn't know who they were, where they were going. And the most important question which arises in every one of us at some point is that we live in a world of sorrow and pain. And what is there after this? And that is why we all look for the divine. And Srila Prabhupada made it available in New York with what, 30, 40 followers to start with? Very few people. And his message resonated and it spread, because we entered an era in which there was so much uncertainty about the self, particularly amongst Europeans who had lost their habit of going to church. They had lost their convictions. And here was somebody who gave them a concrete idea about the fact that we are all immortal. Our soul survives, and this body is only incidental. And he able to convey that in a magnificent way, and a way which people understood. That is the only proof you need, that millions of people were able to grasp this. What to me is remarkable as a scholar of modest achievement, and I'm his age now when he started. I'm 69. But my God, I don't think I'm going to write 70 books, 70 commentaries. He is one of the most published of all our sages on time. And again, I say this is the work of the divine. How else can you do it? A man who is not in good health, who's 69, who I have just been reminded slept 4 hours a day and worked from 2 in the morning. So for me, this is very inspiring that he has made it possible for us to transcend ourselves. This is a transcendental message that he is sending to all of us, you see, regardless. And that is why people of many, many other cultures have found it, because it is truly universal. The other thing which we ought to remember, and with great pride and gratitude, Srila Prabhupada is the most important window into Bharat. People who understand and encounter Bharat do so through him. People who know nothing about us encounter him first. And what a window through which you can look. Is there any better way of being introduced to this great civilization of ours? That he is a summation of this. And what a wonderful message, that our way of life is available to everybody. Our yoga, our Ayurveda, all of that is implicit, embedded. So Srila Prabhupada was not known by people. People know about ISKCON. And that is why I am very grateful to Dr. Sengupta, Hindol, that he has not only introduced him to a much larger audience, but he's done it so well. It was very easy to do a work which was very deferential. But he has written a book which is full of ideas. and daily life, which ordinary people can identify with. So, Hindol, once again, congratulations. No, I want you to speak a bit, then we can, you say a little bit because you are the one who has got the overview of the book.
No, thank you. My job has been made easier because Swamiji gave a very nice overview of Srila Prabhupada's life, and who better to do it than him. And Gautam Da gave us the context to understand Srila Prabhupada. I want to talk a little bit about why this book was written in the first place and why is it called Sing, Dance and Pray. And you know, we are going through a particular moment, and you know, when you do as many book launches as I do, there's always a question, what can I say which is new? So let me try and say something new to all of you, right? And here's my idea of why this book was written, why it has struck a chord in so many people. You know, when countries and nations grow, they first spent a whole range of time fulfilling, you know, in social sciences we have something called the Maslow's hierarchy triangle. So first you fulfill food, and then your clothing, and all your basic needs you fulfill, right? Then you go slowly higher and higher. Then you say, well, I also must have a nice car, and then you say, I must have a nice house, and so on and so forth, then good education. Right at the top is the question of identity and your inner self. Who are you when all of these material things fall apart? Srila Prabhupada's life is wonderful because it is a journey through that Maslow's hierarchy. You see, he's born in a family, extended family, which is very well known and wealthy in Bengal, in Calcutta. But this devotional aspect was always there. That family had that extended family maintained a temple. This devotion towards Sri Krishna was always there. But he didn't jump into and become a monk. He first went to Scottish Church College, where at that time Scottish Church Institution, where he was deeply influenced by Gandhian nationalism. Subhash Chandra Bose was his contemporary in school. He saw that entire movement. He became a successful entrepreneur. Somebody the other day mentioned to me that, in those years, Srila Prabhupada used to own Buick cars, which were very expensive cars and fancy cars of that time. So he was a successful entrepreneur as a pharmacist, right? But he never, alongside this journey of life, he got married, he had children, and so on and so forth. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Bhaktivedanta Swami came later, but A.C. Abhay Charan De, in the early part of his life, his pre-monastic name. He spent an entire journey through that. But he never let go his spiritual seeking and his spiritual hunger. You see, Gautam Da was just talking about how people let go. They are like, well, how can I continue all this spiritual seeking when I have bills to pay, and, there's a war in Russia, my energy bills have become, 40% higher, and, there is poverty on the roads, and food banks need to feed people, and so on and so forth. And inflation is going up, and so on and so forth. But he's a great example in holding on to that spiritual seeking. Because if you read the book, there were times his business was doing really well, but there were times his business was not doing well. There were times he was thinking, oh, okay, it's not doing well, should I expand my business to a different city? There were times he was wondering, how do I get more capital to expand? So all the natural, the natural noise of daily life was very much part of him. He had a wife who would say, well, shouldn't you be focusing more on how to maintain the family and run your business instead of constantly going away and hanging out, as it were, with the monks? When you read all of these things, you realize how close each of these incidents are to our own lives. And through it all, he maintained that sense of seeking, that this is something fundamental to me, and I will not let it go. Until at a time when people retire, he finally took the plunge. And it's almost, when he takes the plunge and becomes a sadhu, a monk, it's almost like he's saying, look, I have done my worldly duty. It is not like I've forsaken my worldly duty. I have done my worldly duty. But there is a higher cause rising and has been rising all through my life inside me. I must now choose to follow that path. And he says, recently also before I came to this book tour, I was looking at this old video of Srila Prabhupada where he's asked, so then don't you have family? He said, no, I'm a monk. I've broken all my ties with my family. He said, so do you have children? He said, yeah, I have wife and child, children and so on and so forth. But I have given up, sannyas. And he says, he uses the word sannyas. He says, I've taken sannyas. So therefore, I have no connection with that world. My children can come to me sometimes for advice and so on and so forth. But other than that, with my wife and my family, I have given up on that worldly life. But when somebody does that, again, the usual expectation is, he became a sannyasi. Then he must have had a very, people would have recognized him and he would have become an influential sannyasi and so on and so forth. But none of that happened to him. For a long time as a sannyasi, he kept trying to boost his movement and failed repeatedly. Until he finally succeeded, and succeeded at a scale that had never been matched, and in fact, even today has never been matched in India's spiritual history. The scale of Srila Prabhupada and the width of Srila Prabhupada's movement has never been matched by any organization. And yes, the only one that comes close is the Swaminarayan sect, of course, Baps. But in his time, he was unmatched in the kind of spread that he managed to have in every corner of the world, in every continent. So I think there's a great lesson to be learned through that. The other great lesson, in my humble opinion, is Srila Prabhupada is India talking back. Today we talk about India becoming a $3 trillion economy, about to become $5 trillion in a few years, this, that and the other. And therefore India has a place in the world. India should be Vishwa Guru. India should be teaching the world things. Srila Prabhupada was Vishwa Guru before the Vishwa Guru slogan came. Because what was he telling these people in New York? What was he telling these people in San Francisco? What was he telling these people in Australia? He was saying there is a parampara in India which if you adopt in your life will become better. So in a sense, Srila Prabhupada pushed the idea of India being Vishwa Guru and India having something great to offer to the world, which is Krishna consciousness, God consciousness, long before the phrase Vishwa Guru became popular. So it is India speaking back to the world at a time when all of this conceptually was not even available to us. The third very important thing about Srila Prabhupada's life is people always think that it is particularly difficult to build such institutions around the world. India you can still manage, but doing it around the world is tough. Remember and I was saying this in another lecture, he built this entire movement by writing letters, because when people would go, he would send his disciples to various parts of the world to set up temples and set up branches of ISKCON. How would he communicate with them? With letters, because there was no phone mostly, and when it came, it was too expensive. And telex was, of course, the only other way, but he had to write detailed letters to give detailed instructions. So, I think a side research of Srila Prabhupada's work should be just the kind of voluminous letters and correspondences he maintained with all his disciples. That itself is incredible. And the fourth point is, apart from building this great spiritual, map around the world of temples, he also built a publishing empire. The book trust he created became one of the largest in the world. Christianity and Christians would always take great pride that the Bible is the most published and sold book in the world. In Srila Prabhupada's time, Srila Prabhupada showed that the Bhagavad Gita could also not only be beautifully published, but also sold in millions and tens of millions around the world. The Srimad Bhagavatam could again be beautifully translated in English, beautifully produced, and send in millions around the world, long before such attempts had ever been made in India. And my fifth point, if you look at the artwork that came out of Srila Prabhupada's movement when he was alive, you will see some of the most beautiful artwork of that time. We talk about, in terms of artistic research, we talk about Raja Ravi Varma's paintings, lithographs. Raja Ravi Varma painted Shakuntala and all these great sort of episodes of Indian spiritual life, right? The other person who created these beautiful images and got the best artists to work on them, during my research I read conversations that Srila Prabhupada is having with his disciples on how to publish his books in Japan. Because you see, in Japan, people are very finicky. They want absolutely everything perfect. So the weight of the paper has to be perfect. The color of the paper has to be perfect. The designs has to be perfect, because otherwise the Japanese won't like it. But if you choose a particular kind of paper, it becomes very expensive. So those conversations are happening, what weight of paper can be used? How can we do the designs even better? So some of the most beautiful spiritual designs that came out of India after Raja Ravi Varma came out through the Krishna consciousness movement of Srila Prabhupada. They spent enormous time, effort and labor to produce this, things that most Indians have never even seen. You look at those images and they are beautiful. They're really beautiful. Each one of them is a masterwork. And Srila Prabhupada handpicked all these great artists to come together to create this beautiful imagery entirely based on our spiritual heritage. So even if you don't understand, and let me say this, even if you don't understand the deep resonances of his spiritual message, you cannot but be moved by the beauty of the message and how it was propagated. Even if it takes you time to understand the deep resonances of what his message of spirituality and Krishna consciousness really meant and could do for your life, you cannot but be entirely moved by the beauty, the transcendental beauty of the imagery that he created. Thank you.
I'm curious about one thing, because you've now re-emphasized this to me as you spoke, is that we always talk about India's cultural outreach, and from the range of things that were achieved by Srila Prabhupada, still it is remarkable that it was done in 11 years, approximately 11 years. Was there no attempt or official engagement with him from the government? That he had this incredible role, which is such a positive way of depicting the civilization. And we always complain that we don't do a good job. And I don't think we in India do a good job. But was there no attempt? Because this is perhaps the most successful way, if you like, quote unquote, of selling India or bringing India to the outside world.
No, certainly there is a deep soft power aspect to Srila Prabhupada's work which should be recognized. There is an incredible soft power aspect to this. I don't think we have done enough work to try and understand this. Because, we are not in an academic conversation here, but also let's remember that he was conceptualizing a certain belonging beyond nationality. And, one could have a longer conversation, an entire conversation just on that. But certainly there's a soft power aspect. Srila Prabhupada was a great letter writer to all our heads of government, our prime ministers, presidents, and some of them did reply and say, well, this is nice. And I do think by the end of his life, when he became increasingly famous around the world, there were certain government officials who may have given him certain support in pockets, but at the same time, and Swamiji could tell us much more about that, but at the same time, right till the end, India's great municipal processes kept on giving trouble to Srila Prabhupada. One of the most interesting and funny thing is, of the more than 100 temples he built around the world in 10 years, one of the most difficult was where? In Mumbai. This just goes to show that, you may do lots of things, but finally some of the, problems will crop up in India. And as always, what were those problems? Again, petty stuff. Somebody trying to, as we would say in Hindi, kabza karo the land. Trying to say, trying to think that, these are all monks. If we threaten them a little bit, they will go away. So I said in another lecture the other day that, there are letters of Srila Prabhupada written to his disciples where he's telling them, I told you not to give this money to this man because I know this man is not right. You gave a little bit of money, but don't give this man any more money because I know this man is not correct. So to that granular level, right? So absolutely. So I think, there are many facets of Srila Prabhupada still that we should explore. But Swamiji could please.
Yeah, it's a very important point that Hindol brought up and Gautamji pointed out. The cultural aspects of India, Prabhupada presented the music in the form of kirtans and bhajans, the musical instruments that went with it. He presented art, like Hindol mentioned. Prabhupada encouraged theatrics, plays, and to depict the different pastimes of Krishna as it's given in the Bhagavatam. Food, Indian food. Srila Prabhupada made Indian food well known all over the world. Prabhupada himself was an excellent cook. And so if you see, and the festivals of India that Srila Prabhupada took all over the world, like the Ratha Yatras, the Janmashtami, and the dance forms to depict these different leelas. So, and of course the literature and temple architecture that he took. So if you see in every facet of Indian culture, which was used for the glorification of God, Srila Prabhupada presented all of those things. In fact, Srila Prabhupada said, we not only have a very sound spiritual science from the Vedic literatures, we also have a very powerful culture. And not everybody may be very interested in philosophical, spiritual science and the message, but everyone can be interestingly, entertainingly engaged with our culture. And Prabhupada said that our Bharatiya culture should conquer the whole world, the hearts of all people all over the world. So this was a very important aspect of Srila Prabhupada presenting these things. And about the challenges that Prabhupada had, innumerable challenges like Hindol mentioned, in India, and of course in other parts of the world. In India, what used to happen was he had 5,000 disciples. Out of them, there were about only 100 disciples who were Indians. The rest of them were all Westerners, Americans, Europeans, Britishers, Australians, South Africans, South Americans, and so on. And so when they came to India in the 70s, invariably they would get cheated. And they would pay, people would demand very high price and such things, and they would get cheated. And the difficulties that Prabhupada had in building the Bombay temple, the temple in Vrindavan, and to acquire land. Another very, very big challenge Prabhupada had was to acquire land in West Bengal, Mayapur, the place of birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he had all kinds of difficulties he would face to buy land and to build the temple. So these were all the challenges that Srila Prabhupada continuously handled. And as very nicely Hindol mentioned, although Srila Prabhupada was a very deep spiritual person, and every day he would give Bhagavata pravachans and he would discuss philosophy of the Gita, Bhagavatam, with innumerable guests that he would get. In the midst of all this, he would also be handling all of these different problems of the institution. Prabhupada, like he mentioned, the telephone was very expensive. Telegram was another thing. Now and then Prabhupada used telegrams. to send to different parts of the world. But largely, he wrote about 8,000 plus letters, which was also published later on. And it comes to around 12 volumes of big books of Prabhupada's writing letters. And so, like this, Prabhupada was deeply spiritual, but at the same time, actively, fully immersed and involved in an institution building. Because Prabhupada, what he wanted to contribute, he did not want that to last only for his lifetime. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prediction is that this Hare Krishna mantra, Sankirtana movement will go on for 10,000 years. It's written in the Bhavishya Purana. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had mentioned that in the Kali Yuga, there will be a golden period of 10,000 years. So he wanted an institution, he wanted books to be published because books are the basis, Prabhupada said. The Vedic literatures are the basis for our movement. And so he wanted an institution to be built which will last beyond his lifetime and continue to spread. And it is in fact happening. When Srila Prabhupada left the world in 1977, there were 108 Krishna temples, and today there are over 500 temples all over the world. So it has been expanding and as it was desired.
I'm tempted to ask you one further question, which is a much more contemporary question. Quite clearly, Srila Prabhupada's earlier life, before his monkhood, he was a businessman. And obviously, to be a businessman and succeed, as you showed he was, he had to have a certain degree of professionalism. Is that the tradition which drives all the organizations? Because the one thing I noticed about ISKCON, that it is very professionally run, as every organization which wants to succeed must be. So is that his tradition, that his letter writing and advice has now become a standard way of how affairs are managed?
In fact, Srila Prabhupada he used to tell his disciples, and the disciples were a big failure in India to get the construction, buildings built and all of that. So he would become sometimes annoyed and he would say, "Why are you so slow? It should be built faster." And he would urge them to do things much faster. And then sometimes he would say, "I am known as an American guru, but why are you doing this way so badly? You should do it in an American way, not this Indian way of doing things so slowly." He had a way of inspiring his disciples. And so, yes, this he wanted everything to be done in a very systematic way, in a very organized way. And he himself was like that, very meticulous, attention to detail. He would go into the details. He would tell, sitting in San Francisco or in Los Angeles temple, he would say, "Go to my room in Calcutta on the second drawer, pull the drawer there, I've kept a key there, take that key and send it to me." To that degree of detailing, meticulousness and attention to, because Prabhupada said that all that we are doing in this world, we are doing it for Krishna. So all this is worship, all of this is aradhana. So this is the way Srila Prabhupada saw. And there's another interesting thing about his deep spirituality. There's one day Srila Prabhupada was handling very complex problem, this devotee and that problem in America, in Australia, handling all of that. And then at some point he sends them all away. And then he calls for a harmonium and he sits on the floor. He's playing on the harmonium and singing some of the Bengali Kirtan songs of Narottam Das Thakur. So like this, he was deeply spiritual, although he was in the midst of all of these things. And so this is a very, very inspiring personality Srila Prabhupada was. And that his personality, his life story is the one which is actually motivating and inspiring devotees all over the world.
The other thing that occurred to me is that he largely built a movement using very young people. Most of his devotees at that time were really very young people. They were, all of them had come to Srila Prabhupada, in their mid-20s, early 20s. They were really, really young people. And obviously they had the enthusiasms and the sort of, lack of attention to detail problems that very young people have. And he had groomed, as much as possible in those 10 years for those people to deliver this. As long as he was alive, he was able to, in a sense, channelize these very young people to deliver in these numerous 108 places around the world. It's not a joke, dealing with 108, imagine, different municipal laws, different, currencies at that time. Even today we think of how to move capital quickly and deploy it and so on and so forth. Imagine trying to raise capital and quickly deploy it in different parts of the world, in Srila Prabhupada's time. So, he, working with youth, and also it's not like these youth were all coming out of, trained out of Harvard and, Yale and MIT. These were all hippies of, of Upper East Side, many of whom had been drug addicts and alcoholics and so on and so forth. He had cleaned up their lives and, maintained them at a particular decorum and ensured that they had been put to service of the Lord and to build this great movement. It's quite remarkable if you think about it. This was his, in a sense, this was the HR of his institution, right? This was the human resources.
Therapy of chanting for these kinds of people.
And for, and it really shows exactly the therapy of chanting. Somehow he had managed to calm them down and clean their lives and, move them away from intoxicants so that they could actually be productively used like this. It's quite remarkable.
I'd like to ask you one question, if I may. Please. This is a slightly controversial question which has always troubled me. There is a habit in India of saying all paths are equal to the divine, something with which I do not agree. But I do think the pining for divinity is universal in every human being. We all pine for the divinity in some form. That part, I think, is for all people everywhere. But the way Srila Prabhupada and other great teachers from our tradition came, they actually guided them towards a path which some Indians say, yes, you may be going, but we are in the first class compartment. That Krishna worship, the Vedas, are the path to the divine, though they keep saying that all paths are possible, but that actually really means the divining is universal.
Yes, and I think this is, and I think this perhaps is destined, this topic perhaps is destined to be eternally controversial, right? However, I think the middle path to this is the following, which you just alluded to. That divinity, there is something universal, like the yearning for divinity is universal. There is the quality of the divine, so to speak, is universal and eternal. Now, if the quality of the divine is universal and eternal, at least that much we can all agree with. The nomenclature part, I do suspect perhaps will be, controversial for a while.
Not at all. It will be straight towards the Vedas. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
If we can take questions, with your permission, Your Grace, we can take questions.
I wanted to ask the conversations between Gautamji and how much of his, if you like, business and his life before being a monk was instrumental in helping him create the structure and the organization?
That's a very important question. If everybody can hear me, okay, I'll use this, I think. Look, that's a very important question, but we also have to ask alongside that, yes, surely, because he had been a successful businessman, surely there were trainings and learnings from there he would use in institution building. But remember, he had been a businessman in India. So therefore, one would think that he would be successful in building an institution in India, right after he had stopped being a businessman in India, right? And yet, when he tried to build an institution in India, he failed. He actually succeeded in America. So it's difficult, therefore, to draw a very quick, straight line between the two, because then one would think that he would have first built a rather successful institution in India. But that clearly did not happen, whereas he had really unprecedented success when he went to America, and that kept on growing. So perhaps that's not something we could very quickly conclude.
I know you said that Srila Prabhupada he went to America and spent there, but how did he get in touch with the Beatles?
A very simple thing. Actually, Srila Prabhupada always held London to be a very great global center, and he had a lot of respect for London, and he always wanted to do something in London. So some of his devotees were sent to London, and they had lots of difficulties. Prabhuji was telling us the other day that they had a lot of difficulties when they first came to London. They had no place to stay. One of the devotees had a little child, so there were a lot of difficulties. But they persisted in trying to reach out to the Beatles and other, prominent members of London society to spread the word. And of course, something, a chord was struck with the Beatles, especially with George Harrison. And that relationship continued right till the end of George Harrison's life. And of course, as you said, George Harrison bought that entire estate and gifted it to.
We should have something in
Yeah.
England or UK.
All right. Yeah.
Thank God,
Yeah. Okay. We'll give somebody else a chance now. Thank you.
So to Swamiji, I'm not sure whether this is one of the first books on the biography of Sree Prabhupada, but if it is the first one, why has it taken so long?
No, a lot of biographies of Srila Prabhupada have been written by ISKCON devotees, and there are maybe about 50 books written on the life of Srila Prabhupada, his disciples writing different aspects of his life. But what happens is that all of those biographies were written by practicing devotees, and it is mostly written for practitioners like us in the temple and directly ISKCON followers. For the movement. Thank you. So, what happened is it's because it's written for the devotees in the movement in ISKCON, it's written in a certain style and in a certain manner. What we were actually looking for was we wanted life of Srila Prabhupada to be told by somebody who is not really a follower of within ISKCON, and it should be told for somebody who is not a follower of ISKCON. And that was the thought we had in mind, and we were in conversation with Penguin in India. And then at some point, Penguin publishers, they recommended Dr. Hindol Sen Gupta. And that's how it happened, and then then he got interested, and then we provided all the books, and he wrote the book, and then Penguin published it.
If I may make one comment about you writing it, it seems to me, first of all, you were always a sympathizer, very clearly, but you also made a journey of discovery in the process of writing, and that is the freshness of discovery that comes across, which won't be for somebody who's writing for his own people. So this freshness actually is the strength of the book, that you managed to, because you were also discovering, but from a very sympathetic vantage. So that I think, and I really, as an academic who reads lots of books, I really do believe that you will enjoy reading the book. Apart from also finding it uplifting, you see, because it has a spiritual message encompassed in successive pages. So you will learn a lot and you'll enjoy it, and it's not very long.
Did you, in this process of discovery, what did you discover by yourself in your journey?
Look, I mean, all books, change primarily the author, that's always true. And I think one, of course, in a very sort of simple way, I have taken up chanting in the process of writing this book. So that, and I always used to meditate. I always had a meditative practice. I have added to that meditative practice a everyday regular chanting practice, right? And I have found it to be extremely useful in many, many circumstances, which I don't want to go into all of them, but let me just say that in many extremely stressful circumstances, I have found it extremely useful. it's very interesting, and life works in very interesting ways. Soon after the book, or when the book was about to be published, or soon after the book got published, my father fell very, very unwell, and extremely unwell, as in like he was really very, very critical. And he continues to be very, very fragile. So actually, a large part of the time that I've spent with the book, especially as it was coming out and then subsequently, has also been some of the toughest periods of my life. And I think really the fact that I wrote this book, the fact that I interacted with this entire universe of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna consciousness. Our family has always been a Krishna Bhakt family all our lives. If you come to my house, actually when the book started, one of the first photographs I sent to Navina Prabhu, who's here, is the photograph that my mother has. It's almost a wall-to-wall photograph of painting of Shri Krishna, and we've always been as a family. But the process of writing this book, the process of adopting chanting, the process of interacting with this entire universe has been a world of great solace to me, and has been something that has given me great reassurance in many ways, at a time which was very, very, very difficult for us as a family, and for me, really seeing my father go through some really extremely delicate hit or miss situations and moments. So I think they say when the pupil is ready, the master appears, right? When you're ready for the message comes to you. So I think I certainly feel personally, at a very personal level, I'm not saying this is to be replicated in any other lives, but for me personally, I definitely feel that what happened in my life and the fact that I had written this book and I was going through this journey, it came together in a very, very interesting way, and in a way which I could only describe as grace. There's no other way I can really describe it. I can only describe this entire process as grace.
I'll just share a small, in ISKCON, when we, in all our discourses, and one of the first things that we introduce and recommend people to take up is to chant Hare Krishna mantra. And so when I was interacting with Hindol, I was not too sure. I was providing him some books, and whenever he wanted he had some questions, we would interact. And I never mentioned to him about chanting. I thought he's a historian, scholar. Just let's leave him, let him write the book.
This is worth mentioning, you're absolutely right. Yes.
And so we had many interactions over 8, 9, 10 months or so. And the last interaction, when he had sent the last chapter, and then he would send a chapter and we would read, and if I had any comments to make, we would send back, and that's how it was back and forth happening. And after the final chapter was completed and sent back, and then I had one conversation with him on the phone. And then after that, it would go to the publisher, and then the book was supposed to come. At the end of the writing of the book, Hindol mentioned that I have begun chanting Hare Krishna mantra every day.
So it's true. No, this is absolutely true. Nobody from ISKCON ever told me you should do this. Nobody from ISKCON ever said, maybe you should do this, maybe you shouldn't do this, maybe these are our practices, you should follow this. No one. Even till date, no one has ever told me you should do this or you shouldn't do this. I have done whatever has come naturally to me, and I continue to do whatever comes naturally to me, right? Because I really feel that's the best way. It will be most authentic if I do it whatever comes naturally to me. But no one has ever told me, to do this or do that. No one even, actually for the longest time, no one even told me to come to the Bangalore temple. It is much later that somebody said, oh, you're going here and there, maybe you should come to the Bangalore temple too. So, which was funny. Actually, I called Navina Prabhu and said, I have to do some ground, look at some things on the ground. So I want to go to Vrindavan. So then he said, yeah, you must come to Vrindavan, we'll make some arrangements for you, and which weekend, because Vrindavan is usually very crowded. We'll see which weekend is a little less crowded and so on and so forth. I think it was near Holi, if I remember. It was near Holi, so we were trying to figure out which weekend would be the right weekend. But even then, nobody told me come to the Bangalore temple. I actually went to the Bangalore temple much later. So, yeah.
I will just... Yes. So, Sing, Dance and Pray book is available. If you happen to get a copy of the book, and if you happen to read the book, I'm warning you, at the end of reading the book, you may also start chanting Hare Krishna. There is one interesting poem written by Rupa Goswami, who was the follower of, immediate disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He writes, if you want to enjoy world with riches and fame and opulence and all those things, please don't worship that young boy standing on the banks of Yamuna, playing the flute. And if you happen to worship him, he will capture your heart and you will forget everything and you will run after him. So this is a kind of, it's known as Nindastuti in Sanskrit, that it's a way of glorifying Lord Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna.
Hare.
Thank you so much. On that delightful note, I would like to formally thank Dr. Gautamji for asking such thoughtful questions and really steering the conversation to unique spaces today. Thank you so much. Thank you also, Dr. Himberji, for speaking with such an open heart about your entire experience and of interacting with Srila Prabhupada's life and journey. Thank you very much, dear audience, for joining us today and asking all the questions that you did.